Firefighters in Blue Ridge still whisper about that night. $1 million mansion burned from the inside out, yet no one touched a match, no fuse blew, and no intruder was ever found. And 3 days earlier, a man ordered the burning of a wooden Virgin Mary statue that had stood on the mountain for 70 years. They say the flames that came for him weren't human. It began in the quiet mountain town of Blue Ridge, Colorado, where people believed the land stayed calm because a humble wooden statue of the Virgin Mary watched over it. Travelers paused before her. Children whispered, "Mother Mary keeps the mountain still." And for generations, nothing had ever disturbed that ridge until Karim Al-Sharif arrived. To some, Karim was just another bold developer with money to burn. To others, especially those who worked under him, he was a storm disguised as a businessman, sharp, proud, and too certain that faith was nothing more than folklore. "It's just a wooden lady," his project manager recalled him saying. "A symbol can't stop progress." When Karim declared the statue an obstacle, the townspeople didn't argue. They pleaded. A school teacher remembered a woman crying outside the town hall. "She's protected us for decades. Don't let him touch her." But Karim had already made up his mind. And one scorching afternoon, beneath a sky without a single cloud, flames curled around the Virgin Mary's wooden robe as workers, shaking, followed orders none of them wanted to carry out. 3 days later, at 2:17 a.m., a faint pop echoed across the valley. A worker on night guard swore he saw the mansion's windows glow white before bursting into flame. "It wasn't a normal fire," he said. "It looked deliberate." And that was when Blue Ridge understood. The fire that destroyed Karim's mansion didn't start with gasoline. It started the moment he burned her. Blue Ridge had always been the kind of place where the mountains felt alive. Locals said the wind carried memories, and the soil remembered tragedies long after people forgot them. At the highest point of the valley stood Saints Ridge, a narrow crest overlooking miles of pine forest. And at its center was the figure that shaped the town's quiet destiny, a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary carved from ancient cedar. No one truly knew who built it. A retired forest ranger once claimed that decades ago, after a devastating mudslide buried 3 families, a silent wanderer climbed the ridge with only a toolbox and a child beside him. He worked alone for weeks, carving through storms and cold nights. When the statue was finished, both father and child vanished without a trace. But from that year on, the land stopped collapsing. Farmers liked to say Mary held the mountain together. Hunters swore that wildlife changed paths around her. And a grandmother who'd lived in Blue Ridge since the 60s often told her church group, "When the fog rolls in thick, you can feel her watching over us." Children grew up calling the hill Mary's watch point. Teens left flowers after exams. Veterans prayed there before deployments. And because the statue was unpainted, weathered by snow and summer sun, she looked less like an artifact and more like a guardian who refused to leave. Even environmental engineers noticed strange consistencies. No landslides in 70 years, soil moisture unusually stable, and winds that always shifted away from the ridge during storms, as if the land itself protected that one spot. To the people of Blue Ridge, the Virgin Mary statue wasn't decoration. It was the reason the valley stayed peaceful. And everyone knew, you didn't touch what kept the mountain still. Karim Al-Sharif arrived in Blue Ridge like a man who believed every mountain had a price tag. To the townspeople, he was a stranger in a tailored coat, stepping out of a black SUV with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the word no. But to those who researched him, he was more complicated. An immigrant success story turned ruthless developer. Born in Amman, Jordan, Karim grew up in a modest Muslim household before moving to the United States at 20 with nothing but a student visa and ambition. Former classmates described him as brilliant, relentless, and allergic to sentiment. A college friend once said, "Karim didn't believe in luck, only leverage." Over 2 decades, he transformed that mindset into a real estate empire stretching across Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado. He specialized in land others avoided, abandoned deserts, storm-damaged hills, towns scarred by economic decline. He'd rebuild them, polish them, and sell the vision back to wealthy outsiders. Investors admired his courage. Locals called it insensitivity, and Karim made no effort to hide his disdain for superstition or local beliefs. A former project manager recalled him laughing during a meeting in Arizona. People worship rocks and trees. I worship results. When he set his sights on Blue Ridge, he saw untouched land, stunning elevation, and enormous profit potential from a luxury eco-resort. What he didn't see, or refused to see, was the emotional map woven into the region. The communities, the memories, and especially the ridge crowned by the Virgin Mary. To Karim, it was simple math. If a symbol blocked progress, it had to move, or burn. And from the moment he stepped foot in Blue Ridge, those who dealt with him before already sensed the coming clash. They'd seen it in his eyes. Karim didn't negotiate with what he couldn't quantify. The trouble began the moment Karim unfolded the blueprint of his luxury eco-resort on the conference table inside Blue Ridge's tiny town hall. To him, the design was a masterpiece. Glass villas, infinity decks, a grand stone entrance that would become the valley's new landmark. But to everyone else in that room, one detail stood out. The entrance gate sat exactly where the Virgin Mary statue had stood for 70 years. The silence was heavy. Then Sheriff Nolan cleared his throat. You can build anything you want, just not on Mary's watch point. Karim didn't even look up from the blueprint. Then the ridge needs to adapt. Word spread instantly. A school board member recalled the unease. It was like someone tried to rewrite the town's family history. Farmers wrote letters. A group of retirees gathered signatures. Even teenagers, who normally didn't care about town politics, posted videos begging to protect the ridge. Still, Karim was unmoved. To him, sentiment was simply resistance wrapped in emotion. A former city planner remembered his exact words during a tense zoning meeting. I don't negotiate with folklore. The land is purchased. The project moves forward. Yet the mountains seemed to push back long before the townspeople did. Surveyors noted strange compass readings. Ground scanners malfunctioned. Workers reported an eerie stillness on the ridge, as if the wind refused to touch the soil. One geologist told the county office, "It felt like the mountain didn't want us there." But Karim dismissed every concern, technical, spiritual, or emotional. He saw profit margins, not warnings. And that was the moment the line was drawn. A town guarding its sacred ridge against a man who believed nothing was sacred unless it paid dividends. Tension reached its breaking point on a Tuesday morning when Karim walked the ridge with his site supervisors. The fog was lifting, revealing the weather-worn Virgin Mary statue standing quietly in the clearing. Most people felt a strange calm there. Karim felt nothing but irritation. A junior architect suggested moving the statue to a memorial garden within the resort. "Guests love cultural history," she said. Karim didn't even stop walking. "History is expensive. Fire is cheap." The supervisors exchanged glances. One of them, Miguel Torres, later admitted he felt something tighten in his chest. "It wasn't fear of Karim," he said. "It was the feeling you get right before lightning hits." That afternoon, Karim called a closed-door meeting at the temporary site office. The workers stood stiff, hands clasped, waiting for instructions. Karim pointed toward the ridge, visible through the window. "Tomorrow you take fuel and clear the obstacle. I want it done by noon." A foreman stammered, "Sir, the town—" Karim cut him off. "The town doesn't own the mountain. I do." Word spread faster than the order itself. By sunset, candles flickered around the statue as townspeople gathered quietly. A retired nurse whispered, "We can't stop him, but maybe she can." No protests, no shouting, just people praying under the pine shadows. Meanwhile, Karim enjoyed dinner at his rented mansion, bragging to investors over the phone. One worker overheard him say, "Burning it sends a message. I fear nothing." But in every story told later, this same detail never changed. When Karim finished speaking, a sudden gust slammed against the mansion's windows and rattled every glass in the house. A neighbor swore he heard it too. A wind that didn't sound like wind at all. It sounded like a warning. The next day at exactly 11:58 a.m., a pickup truck crawled up Saints Ridge carrying fuel cans, rags, and a small group of workers who wished they were anywhere else. The sun was merciless. The pines barely moved. Every sound felt swallowed by the stillness. Miguel Torres, the foreman, later confessed he hesitated before stepping out of the truck. "It felt like stepping into a church with muddy boots," he said. But orders were orders, and Karim's shadow loomed long, even from miles away. The first splash of fuel hit the base of the wooden Virgin Mary statue. A woman standing at the bottom of the ridge screamed, "Please, don't do this!" Her voice cracked through the silence, but the workers had already lit the rag. The flame caught slowly at first, creeping along the cedar wood as though it were reluctant to burn. Then with a sudden hiss, the fire curled upward, swallowing the carved robe and hands. Witnesses swear the wind changed direction in an instant, sweeping uphill instead of down. One firefighter watching from town said he saw smoke spiral unnaturally tight, as if it were being pulled upward by something invisible. As the fire reached the statue's face, Miguel froze. His co-workers later said he looked pale as snow. He whispered, "Her eyes. Did you see that?" They didn't answer. They didn't want to look. A teenage boy recording from the tree line dropped his phone when he saw the same thing. The carved eyes, blackened by heat, seemed to open before collapsing into ash. The statue fell with a soft crack, not like wood snapping, but like something exhaling its last breath. And for the rest of that day, no matter where anyone walked in Blue Ridge, they said the scent of burned cedar followed them like a shadow. The burning of the Virgin didn't end on the ridge. It followed Blue Ridge home. Night one arrived with a wind no one recognized. It wasn't strong, but it circled houses in slow, deliberate loops, like something searching. A mother living near the trailhead said the wind pressed against her windows with the weight of footsteps. Children woke crying, insisting they heard someone walking around their rooms. A rancher swore his horses refused to face the ridge, backing into corners with wide, trembling eyes. By night two, the air turned heavier. A construction worker who helped burn the statue slipped from a scaffold with no explanation. Dry planks, no loose screws, no wind. When asked what happened, he muttered only one phrase: "I smelled smoke under the ground." Another worker quit on the spot after a bulldozer's engine died instantly the moment it touched the ridge. Mechanics found nothing wrong. "It's like the machine refused," one said. But night three was the one people still whisper about. Around 2 a.m., several homeowners reported hearing soft tapping along their walls, always moving from the direction of Saints Ridge. A 9-year-old girl, the daughter of a local food truck owner, sat up screaming after drawing the same image over and over. A woman in a white robe standing in ashes, her face hidden by smoke. Her mother asked, "Sweetheart, who is that?" The girl answered with a voice too calm for her age, "She's looking for the man who burned her." Even Karim couldn't escape the unease. His chauffeur claimed that during a late-night drive, Karim clenched the door handle so tightly his knuckles went white. When asked what he heard, he only replied, "Footsteps behind the car," but nothing was there. 3 nights, and Blue Ridge already felt like a town waiting for a verdict. The fire struck on the third night, at 2:17 a.m., when the mountain was so still it felt like it was holding its breath. Karim's mansion, newly built, fortified with the latest fire suppression tech, sat alone in the valley like a glowing glass fortress. But to the workers who passed by earlier that evening, something already felt wrong. They said the air around the house carried the same scent that lingered on the ridge: burned cedar. The first person to see the flames was a security guard on the night shift. He later told investigators, "It didn't ignite, it appeared." 1 second the windows were dark. The next, a blinding orange pulse lit every pane from the inside, as if someone had switched on a furnace behind the walls. When firefighters arrived, they were stunned. There was no sign of an electrical short, no fallen candles, no accelerants. The mansion's alarm system failed to trigger, yet every circuit tested perfectly after the fire. One captain described it in a hushed interview. It was as if the fire knew exactly where to start. The point of origin was the most unsettling detail. The flames began in the attic storage room, a place only Karim had access to. Inside that room, now reduced to blackened dust, was a small wooden fragment he had kept as a souvenir from the statue he burned. Firefighters found Karim on the second-floor landing, curled against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. He wasn't burned, he wasn't injured, but his eyes were wide with terror, locked on a spot only he could see. Later, when he could finally speak, the guard heard him whisper, "She was standing in the fire, and she was looking at me." The valley, once quiet, now understood. The flames hadn't destroyed the mansion. They had come to deliver a message. Karim left the hospital that same morning, but those who saw him said he didn't walk out. He stumbled, like a man whose spirit had been shaken loose. The once confident developer, known for his iron posture and colder-than-steel tone, now kept his eyes lowered, flinching at every flicker of light. And his misfortune didn't stop with the fire. Within 48 hours, a video taken by a teenager, recording the burning of the Virgin statue, spread across social media. The footage showed flames swallowing the wooden figure, townspeople crying, and workers glancing nervously at the sky. Hashtags like Karim Protect the Virgin and a Blue Ridge Miracle exploded nationwide. Christian communities condemned it. Interfaith groups questioned his motives. Investors panicked. 3 major partners withdrew from Karim's resort project in the same afternoon. Stock in his development company plunged. Contracts froze. Banks stalled his funding. A former financial officer described it bluntly. It wasn't backlash. It was an avalanche. Meanwhile, Karim wrestled with something far more terrifying than bankruptcy. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the same image. A woman in white, standing silently in a field of ash. His driver swore he caught Karim praying under his breath, whispering verses he hadn't spoken since childhood. Workers stationed near his temporary cabin claimed they heard him shouting in the middle of the night, "Leave me alone! Stop following me!" One night, a neighbor said Karim burst outside, barefoot and trembling, insisting someone had stood at the foot of his bed. "A woman," he said, "with smoke around her face." His empire was collapsing, but the fear eating him alive wasn't financial ruin. It was the growing certainty that what he burned on that ridge had not left him. Karim's search for forgiveness did not begin with a prayer. It began with exhaustion, the kind that breaks a man from the inside out. After 3 nights without sleep and days filled with panic attacks, he walked into St. Anthony's Chapel, a small wooden church tucked behind Blue Ridge's oldest oak trees. The door wasn't locked. Locals say it never is. Father Joseph O'Connell, the aging priest with steady eyes and a voice worn by years of listening, sensed something before Karim even stepped inside. "There are footsteps of guilt," he often said, "and they sound different than footsteps of fear." When Karim entered, he didn't speak. He simply collapsed into the nearest pew. The priest sat beside him without asking a single question. It took nearly 20 minutes before the first sentence left Karim's lips. "I burned what I didn't understand." From there, the confession spilled out, not just the fire on the ridge, but years of choices built on arrogance, ambition, and disbelief in anything he couldn't measure. At one point, Father Joseph asked softly, "What do you fear is following you?" Karim's answer chilled him. "A woman standing in ashes. She doesn't move. She just watches." Instead of rebuke, the priest offered a truth Karim wasn't expecting. "Some shadows come from outside. Some are born within us." For nearly 2 hours they spoke, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in silence. Karim wept openly, clutching the sleeves of his coat like a man drowning. When he finally stood to leave, Father Joseph didn't tell him he was forgiven. He simply placed a hand on Karim's shoulder and said, "Repentance begins when you stop running." And for the first time since the fire, Karim didn't run. While Karim struggled with sleepless nights and ghosts he couldn't name, the people of Blue Ridge quietly turned their hearts back to the ridge. It began with just 5 residents, a retired carpenter, a middle school teacher, 2 elderly farmers, and a teenage boy who couldn't stop drawing the woman in white standing in smoke. They didn't make flyers or gather committees. They simply met at dawn, tools in hand, under a sky still gray with morning mist. "We're not replacing her," the carpenter said softly. "We're restoring what held this town together." The new statue was carved from redwood, a material strong enough to withstand the mountain's winters. Every stroke of the chisel was deliberate, almost prayerful. A neighbor who visited them brought coffee and later recalled, "They didn't talk much. It felt like watching a choir work without singing." Strangely, during the week they carved, the weather didn't behave like December at all. No frost, no icy wind. The muddy trail leading to Saints Ridge stayed unnaturally dry. A biologist hiking nearby said, "It was like the mountain was clearing a path." On the morning the statue was carried up the ridge, Nearly 30 townspeople followed, quiet, solemn, carrying flowers, candles, or nothing at all. There was no priest, no ceremony, no speeches. Only the sound of boots on pine needles and the soft hum of wind threading through the branches. Then, as the redwood Virgin Mary was set onto the old stone pedestal, a figure appeared from the back trail, Karim Al-Sharif. He held no entourage, no coat, no defenses, just a sealed envelope in his hand. He stepped forward, bowed his head before the new statue, placed the envelope gently at its base, and turned away without a word. Later, Father Joseph revealed the truth. Whoever left that envelope had quietly paid for every penny of the reconstruction. No one said the name. No one needed to. In the weeks that followed the statue's return, Blue Ridge seemed to breathe again. The strange winds faded. Animals returned to their usual paths. Children no longer woke in the night fearing footsteps by their beds. Even the pine needles on Saints Ridge glowed a little greener, as if relieved to have their guardian watching once more. But the town noticed something else too. Karim was nowhere to be found. His temporary cabin sat empty. His company's offices were dark. A neighbor swore he saw Karim leave before sunrise one morning, carrying only a small duffel bag. No driver, no assistance, just a man walking away from the valley he once tried to reshape. Rumors spread quickly. Some said he had returned to Jordan. Others insisted he checked himself into a monastery in Arizona, known for welcoming people seeking silent repentance. Father Joseph only offered 9 quiet words. A man can disappear without being lost. What mattered more was what he left behind. Construction on the resort permanently halted. The land deeds were transferred back to the county with a handwritten note. Let the ridge belong to those who love it. No signature. Yet no one questioned who had written it. Saints Ridge, once threatened by bulldozers, became a protected site. Volunteers built benches along the trail. Hikers left wildflowers at the base of the new statue. On clear mornings, you could see families praying, soldiers lighting candles, tourists standing in silence. Not out of fear, but reverence. A high school student wrote in her senior essay, "Mary's watch point isn't holy because of a statue. It's holy because it reminds us what happens when we forget what's sacred." As for Karim, his name faded from business headlines but remained in local memory. Not as a villain, but as a warning, a lesson carved into the mountain story. You can buy land, but you cannot buy the right to disrespect what others find holy. And if you burn the sacred, sometimes the fire comes for you. If you want more stories like this, true, powerful, and unforgettable, make sure to subscribe to Touched by Mary. Your support helps these miracles and lessons reach more hearts across the world.